Welcome to Green Building Matters, the podcast that matters for green building professionals. Learn insight in green buildings as we interview today's experts in LEED and WELL. We'll learn from their career paths, war stories, and all things green, because green building matters. And now our host, and yes, he has every LEED and WELL credential. Here's Charlie Cicchetti.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Cicchetti, and today I'm joined by Nathan Gauthier. He's up in the Boston area, and he's the director on the sustainability side at Shawmut Design and Construction. Nathan, thanks for jumping on here.
Thanks for having me, Charlie.
You know, we've been getting to know each other a little bit more, and you've really made a career out of not just green buildings, but I really want to talk about some advanced stuff you and your team are doing, and also some of the, I guess, lecture work you do. But take us back. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school?
Well, I grew up in rural Michigan in the southwest corner of the state. I think I graduated with 35 people or something like that.
Nice.
So I quickly got out of there. Once I graduated high school, I went to Texas A&M at Galveston, their maritime campus, to study marine biology. So there I focused on wetlands ecology. I really liked the water and had started scuba diving at age 15. And
Wow.
I thought I was going to go learn to be prepare myself for environmental law. So that never ended up happening.
Well, and we'll have to get to that environmental side of it. But yeah, that must have been a big change going from rural Michigan down to the big state of Texas. Was that a big difference for you?
It was. I narrowed it down to Alaska Fairbanks and A&M Galveston, and A&M won because it had a larger research vessel. And then because I was not in the Corps of the Merchant Marine Corps, I never once got on the ship. But that was actually the reason that I picked A&M over Alaska was the size of the boat.
Yeah.
But obviously everything was quite a bit different. I went to I was a midwestern town where I lived that didn't have a lot of diversity or food options or second languages or anything like that. So of course, being in Texas with Texas A&M Galveston drew people from around the country and internationally because it's pretty well known for marine biology and other maritime sciences.
That's fantastic. And so you had mentioned that you were even thinking environmental law. So somewhere, sounds like, when you were younger, you must have been thinking about the environment, maybe make a go of it. So how did you really become more sustainability minded?
Yeah, my hometown is close to the beach, and I, always loved the water, in Lake Michigan in that case. But, I started scuba diving at 15, and I thought I was going to do something to spend all my time at or near the water. I really like hiking. And when I was really young, we used to go hunting with my biological father, who had a construction company, and it's called Energy Conscious Builders, but not at all with an eye towards protecting the environment or protecting people. He was just really focused and still is focused on saving money. So he always, over insulated buildings, and made sure that they could be heated with just one wood burning stove in the center. But just to save money. At the same time, he would, change our own oil and dump it in our gravel driveway to keep the weeds from growing. So he had a different definition of environmentally friendly than I do. But yeah, and I just really like being outside, and I've continued to, throughout, no matter what I've done, I've really wanted to spend time outside and at or near the water or in the mountains or, that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing. Now, along the way, Nathan, did you have any mentors that really come to mind?
Yeah, not early life. I don't feel like I did. The first person that comes to mind would be when I was in South Carolina for grad school, the first grad school. Trish German ran the Sustainable Universities Initiative, and she was like the first sustainability professional that I'd ever met. She wasn't faculty, but she worked with faculty. She worked with students. She worked with staff. She had me working with so I had an internship there, as well as I was in that department that they supported. So she had me working with the facilities department to develop key performance indicators. They were advocating for the first LEED dorm, and I did a lot of the groundwork on pushing for the LEED dorm, which at the time was a pretty new idea. So I really liked working with her. Plus, she was the person who motivated me to actually finish my thesis, which seemed to take me forever to get around to finishing. So I appreciate that from Trish. Also at South Carolina, Phil Barnes, one of the professors, Dr. Barnes, he managed the program on environmental management systems, the ISO 14000 program. And I became an auditor with him, and we would go into BMW suppliers and DoD facilities and do audits. And I really liked the exploratory nature, the problem solving of just going into a facility and pulling people aside and asking them what their environmental policy was and seeing if they were really walking the walk, not just, ISO 14000 and all those programs have a ton of paperwork, but the auditing process was going into the building and seeing if it was actually implemented on the ground. And I really like that process.
Yeah, no, and you got to get that feedback. And I can't wait to talk more about your current role, but we can't skip past the middle part, right? So tell us a little bit about some of your early lead work up and down the East Coast. And then you got tied in with Harvard. I mean, you've really become the sustainability guy here, but really had some early wins in lead. Is that right?
Yeah, so I was fortunate that Harvard was looking for somebody in their Green Campus initiative to focus on buildings. And I had, the sustainability, my master's in environmental management. And then I'd done a contractor background and worked a little bit with the LEED dorm. So when I started working there, the Green Campus initiative was just starting pushing for green buildings around campus. And they had a really interesting model where it was fee for service. So Harvard is a huge campus, 660 buildings at the time, 26 million square feet, and all the different schools and stuff. But the central services, they act just like service providers. So they can grow if you can sell more services. So from when I started there at 4 people, and we would push pilot projects for lead consulting or building commissioning or energy auditing or whatever we could think of, it grew to like 25 people when I left. And I ended up consulting on over 80 lead projects. Wow. And, doing dozens of commissioning projects and energy auditing projects and stuff like that. So yeah, in a really short period of time, I was able to get exposure to more projects than just about, any other. I can't imagine any architect or anybody getting the same type of exposure because of the nature of being on the owner side. And then a lot of Harvard would let me moonlight. I asked the first time one of the architects who worked with me on a Harvard project asked if I could work with them outside of the university. So I was not allowed to as Harvard, but I was allowed to moonlight. So I started doing a lot of consulting outside. I did the first Platinum LEED version 2.2 project in South Carolina, anywhere in the world, but it was in South Carolina. And I used to take all of my vacation days to fly to Peru for a weekend to audit a hotel, or fly to Dubai for a week and do a training or help with a project or something like that. So for many years, all of my time was spent on green buildings, and I've been a consultant on 150 plus.
Wow. No, I love it. I love that entrepreneur hustle there, the moonlighting, and just you filled that time with working on a lot of cool sustainability projects. So yeah, 150 lead projects. Not many can claim that. And, for those listening, sure, right now we're on the LEED version 4.1, maybe, as of fall 2018 on new construction interiors. On the existing building side, maybe a little earlier, 2018. But yeah, I remember those days, Nathan, version 2.2 on the new construction side. So it was exciting. You got the first platinum under after those tweaks. That's good stuff. So now let's get a little closer to present. I mean, you spend a lot of time on the facility side. You've consulted on the new construction. So you really do have a unique skill set. You've got both sides, the new and the existing buildings. So can you tell us some more along the way, though? You spent some time in Rwanda. I assume that was probably one of your proudest accomplishments, but I'm sure there's more. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So first, you mentioned new construction and existing buildings. Just while at Harvard, I made a conscious effort to switch more to the facility side because it was the bigger challenge, and there was just a lot more work to do there. So after a lot of new construction and major renovation work, existing facilities was kind of where I shifted towards. So yeah, I eventually left Harvard and did some work. I was with Jones Lang LaSalle for the Phillips account and managed all of their North and South American portfolio. So during that time, I met my wife and got married, and she's a faculty member at the Harvard Medical School. She supports Partners in Health, and both of us had been in the Peace Corps when we were younger, before we knew each other. And we thought it would be fun to start our married life living overseas. So she'd always supported projects through her work in Africa, Central Africa.
Yeah.
And they asked if she could be there full time doing capacity building for research in Rwanda. So that's how we started off our marriage. We spent a month in Vietnam on honeymoon and then went to Rwanda to ended up being 3.5 years. We lived there. And during that time, I taught at the architecture school. I consulted on projects, some master plans, some projects in all around the world. But I also became construction manager for UNICEF. So I during that time was able to, they would get money from international donors, DFID from United Kingdom, JICA from Japan, and then also the private organizations, H&M Foundation and IKEA Foundation. And they were really focused on early childhood development. The country of Rwanda essentially have primary schools for every student. They're maybe not the highest quality and all of that, but they at least have schools. They've met some of their goals around that. So UNICEF is focused to try to provide facilities for early childhood development. So I delivered essentially 20 plus daycares or early childhood development centers across the country in some really rural areas, most of them not having electricity or running water. But I did some work in the refugee camps as well, the various refugee camps. So some of the facilities, in addition to the 20 plus permanent facilities, I did some temporary facilities and semi-permanent facilities. But all the green building principles are really interesting to see applied there because, we're looking at acoustics. Well, the acoustics of an uninsulated metal roof in they have 6 months of rainy season are really poor without some sort of a barrier to make the space usable. And daylighting is much more important when you don't have an electric light in the space, and natural ventilation is more important when there is no mechanical system. So I was able to really see those best practices, the benefit of applying best practices in those situations.
That's amazing. Wow. What a fun way to start the married life, but then really making a difference. And, I know you'd come back to the States, done some more consulting, and you're back in the Boston area, of course. So, what else stands out on that highlight reel? Nathan, any other accomplishments, achievements along the way you want to look back on?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have accomplishments that I'm really proud of in like the project specific ones, first lead project, the first platinums or something, first double platinums or some of the first double platinums. But I really like when my contribution was able to make a longer effort. So I chaired Harvard University's Green Building Standards Committee. So, they have really aggressive green building standards, and having helped get those adopted, I'm proud of that. I was chair of the EA tag when we developed the LEED version 4. I would take most of those calls from Rwanda at off hours from the rest of the tag. So, in the version 4 now, I'm working on some projects where they're incorporating demand response or monitoring based commissioning or envelope commissioning. And, it makes me proud to know that my project and hopefully hundreds of others are incorporating those best practices in part because of the LEED changes that our tag was able to introduce into LEED. So I really like those types of accomplishments that are longer lasting and hopefully we'll continue to reap benefit.
Yeah, no, it's a big deal. And I think this is a good time to talk about it. It's something I'm very passionate about is the handoff from designing and building green, right? The LEED for new commercial building side of things to, maybe a LEED for existing building program where we operate green every single day. So, whenever I teach a LEED class, and you probably agree, we design and build green, we set up the building to be a green building, but man, how's it running? And how are we doing day to day? And how do we operate? Did we have proper training? And what feedback loops do we have in place? So, I personally spend a lot of time on the LEED for existing building side, and I love the O&M rating system, do a lot of work in, say, New York City. So, yeah, can you speak to that? Because as I understand it, that's a huge part of your role at your company. So can you talk a little bit about and maybe share a few best practices? Gosh, how do we make sure we didn't just design and build the Tesla, but it can really be run that way?
Yeah, well, that's, as you noted, it's a problem I think everybody's aware of. It's a lot of projects still refer to how well they were designed to be, but don't talk about their actual performance. And even if all new buildings are designed and built well, we have a lot of existing building stock that we could improve. So my actual title at Shawmut is a Director of Facility Management Integration and Sustainability. And that first part of my job is all about that transition from construction to operations, and talking with the client or the operator super early, hopefully in pre-construction, and asking them what they're ultimately going to need to be successful. And so that's my first advice, is just having that conversation really early. There is a lot of work being done in the New England area, Massachusetts and Rhode Island. I do a lot of work in where they're building new schools, and schools are now up to 200 plus million. We've seen a couple recently in over 200 million in construction costs.
Oh, wow.
But even an inexpensive school is around here is $40 million, something like that. But you'll have an old school that's essentially the model is the custodial staff are the only staff responsible for the operation of the building on a day-to-day basis. They're the only people full-time on site. And that model, maybe there will be a district, somebody more technically savvy to be shared by the district. But custodial staff is, probably inadequate for these more simple buildings, more antiquated buildings. But now, the state and the communities, they're raising taxes to pay for this super expensive building. And there are incentives to be energy efficient. We have some the more advanced energy codes around here. But operating, dual enthalpy economizers and demand control ventilation and daylight harvesting lighting systems and all the sophisticated scheduling and just everything that needs to go into a building now that to reach the higher levels of performance, both in terms of energy efficiency and occupant comfort. They're complicated. They require a more sophisticated staff. They require reminders about maintenance. They require elaborate training and follow up with the subcontractors. And so talking about that early is important. And for most, this was true in Rwanda. It was really easy to find a donor to build a new $200,000 daycare. It was really hard to find a donor to help them with annual operating expense. So anything that we could do in the capital side, the initial project, to make it easier to maintain in the long run was money well spent. So just in that case, thicker metal sheeting on the roof, thicker PVC for the rain collection so that it didn't quickly start cracking from exposure to the sun. Well, that's true with our schools and our other capital projects here as well. They're taking out a loan, they're getting a bond, whatever. We're bidding from subs, so we can ask for a lot more, a year of preventative maintenance, extended warranties, follow-up training. We can include that in the capital project. And then that's the only way the schools are going to be able to receive some of those services, because it would be really hard for them to do a capital project and then also greatly increase their operating budget. So I push for that on all of our projects.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I think just that gap, some buildings are built to be sold. Some are built to be, operated by the developer for a long time. And there is that gap still. One of the biggest energy hogs in New York City is actually a lead core and shell platinum building. So it's just, what are we doing with the handoff? And, so can you tell us a little bit about what else is keeping you busy today, Nathan? And then I wanted to follow up with monitoring-based commissioning. I think a lot of people are not familiar with that. I think we've heard of commissioning, right? New construction buildings, it's required. It's a prerequisite. It comes to us right from the Navy. But tell us a little bit about monitoring-based commissioning and what else is keeping you busy today. Okay,
so the majority of our projects still don't go for monitoring-based or ongoing commissioning, but some do. And now with just the power of big data and being able to write algorithms to identify inefficiencies or anomalies in that big data, you can do a lot by just picking points strategically within your building automation system, points that reflect performance of individual pieces of equipment or of systems in the building. And it's if you have that point every 5 minutes, every 15 minutes, whatever you're collecting that information, and you're trending it against what you saw yesterday, what you saw last year, the same time, what you saw the last time the outdoor temperature was that same temperature. You can set up automated, we do a lot of work with Brown University, and they use a program called Sky Sparks, and it's a spark that they write their programs to alert them whenever they're out of tolerance whenever there's something that isn't where you would expect it to be. But to do that with people would be cost prohibitive. You'd need a lot of people on staff. You need expertise. You'd need to know about the buildings. So now the costs come way down to either through your building automation system or as a separate program, send the data offsite, into the cloud, let somebody analyze it and send you back alerts if you're short cycling or, your damper didn't close when it should have, or your lights stayed on overnight, or any of those things that might be inefficient and wasting energy.
Yeah, it's so neat. I think some people have probably seen the commercial on TV of Watson in the elevator. It's like, hey, don't get on this elevator. It's about to break down. I think everyone listening also needs to kind of get familiar with words like not just preventative maintenance, but predictive maintenance. And,
right.
And I'd say, Nathan, a little bit of, quote, artificial intelligence might be working its way in too, but we got to get the data, right?
Yeah, and we don't do much predictive yet. Predictive maintenance, but yeah, you can imagine time, and especially in industry. When I was with Philips, there was a lot more, on the industrial side where we had LED wafer factories that they were making millions of dollars a day in profit. You didn't want them down for a second, and so predictive maintenance, vibration analysis, and just keeping track of run hours and all of those sorts of things. So you know when a change is needed, just the same way you used to do a group relamping for fluorescent lights. You just pick a time and replace all your lamps before they needed it, rather than wait for them to burn out and need individual replacements. Well, now across your entire building, all of your equipment and systems, there's enough data that exists. Just like your engine light will tell you when it's time to change your oil in your car, you can get that same level of detail for your building now. And that's what you need. Our cars are too complicated now for me to know what's going on. I need a computer to tell me that. And the same is true of our buildings. So we should have the same diagnostic tools in our buildings that we have in our cars.
Yeah, I love it. You and I could talk commissioning all day, but I think just one more point to those listening to the Green Building Matters podcast here is, sure, lead new construction. We're required. It's a prerequisite for fundamental commissioning. Let's make sure what the owner wanted is what the designers designed and the contractors installed it, and it's running the right way day one. But then what happens is sometimes we have to do or retro commissioning, or what Nathan's really pushing, monitoring based. Hey, let's keep it going. Don't let the building get too far off of its best settings. This is how we really want to run this green building. So I applaud the work you're doing there, Nathan. That's awesome.
Thanks.
So any other projects you can talk about? Let's talk a little bit about some projects, and then I want you to talk a little bit about some of your adjunct work with a couple of really good universities there.
Okay, well, so I'm with a construction management firm now, which is my first time since, as a kid doing this. But I'm learning a lot, and I get to be involved in a lot of projects from the contractor side. So one project that I'm working on that I'm learning a lot from, and I really enjoy being part of, is we're owner's rep for power purchasing agreement. That's a bunch of solar that's being installed at Albertus Magnus College down in Connecticut. So this is the only one where we're not the contractor, but the college asked us to stay on board, and they're putting up 1,000 kW worth of PV. So just anytime I get to do a lot of PV, I'm excited. And in the past, parking lot PV had always been prohibitively expensive. So I've done a lot of projects on the roof, but not on in parking lots. So this is the first one where I've been involved, where it's a large parking lot array. Somebody else is funding. Green Street is funding, and AMC is going to do a power purchasing agreement to buy the electricity back. So that's exciting. We've been getting a lot of net zero energy and living building challenge proposals recently. We just won a project with Southern Connecticut State University, their business school, where they want the new business school building to be the first net zero energy building in state of Connecticut. So, I think that would be a great project. It's still right in the early stages of design, but to see a state agency put that in their RFP is awesome. We've done one other net zero energy with Shawmut Rosemary Hall a while ago that we've completed, but we're on one right now in pre-con. We have two projects right now that I'm responding to that are pursuing, say they want to pursue Living Building Challenge, which, again, when I was on the board of directors for the USGBC, and that was back when Living Building Challenge was part of the Cascadia Green Building Council. And I didn't think it would ever get that much adoption, and it's still around. It's in version 3.1. And to see multiple projects at large organizations say they're going for it is really exciting. We're also seeing a lot of passive house proposals come in with passive house. I recently became a passive house builder, and the new stretch code for Massachusetts has an aggressive energy code, but they have a optional stretch code that's more aggressive. And on the residential side, they put in passive house certification as a form of compliance. So we're seeing more of that for like multifamily dormitories, which is exciting. I like the verifiable envelope performance elements of passive house. And then finally, our group does a lot of more integrative project delivery. So we do a lot of design build, but we also do a lot of IPD, integrated project delivery. And I'm involved in this RISD, Rhode Island School of Design dorm project that we're on right now. IPD, I'm the MEP cluster head, but we're fully co-located every Monday, the entire team, all the subcontractors, the key subs, the designers, the construction management firm. We all work in the same office. We share information real time. The building's under construction, and we're still working on the design as we go, getting the information right in time. So that IPD and then lean construction as well. Construction hasn't gotten more efficient over the years. It's kind of lacking behind industry in terms of gaining efficiency, and that kind of integrated project delivery is hopefully going to address some of that.
Yeah, IPD. A long time ago, I worked for Opus, and that's where I cut my teeth on lead. And they were fully integrated, buy the dirt, design the building, build it, and even property manage it all under one roof. So, and I love it. So talk about some of the work you're doing at Harvard and at Massachusetts Maritime Academy. And my question is, are you talking about living building challenge? Are you talking about passive house? Are you talking about lead? Or are you still really pushing fundamental sustainability in green buildings?
Well, so I teach at these two universities right now. And at Massachusetts Maritime Academy, the program it's a master's in facilities management. I actually got that degree years ago, and I'm now teaching in the program. So mine is the only sustainability course. So it's a little bit higher level. It's entirely focused on what a facility manager might need to know. So it's sustainable facilities management. And I talk about rating systems. That's the only mention of living building challenges in one class. But some of the elements, like the red list portion of living building challenge, I talk about a bit more just when I'm talking about chemicals of concern and some of that. But that one's a lot more introductory than my Harvard course. The Harvard class is part of they have an environmental program and degrees and certificates in green building and that sort of thing through their extension school. And so that one's entirely online now. It used to be in person and online. Now it's entirely online. And my course is one of multiple green building courses. So I'm a lot more detailed in that one, focusing on high performance buildings for occupant wellness. And I talk all about the occupant wellness side of living building challenge and well and fit well and all of those. I don't focus on rating systems. I focus on the topics, and just some of those topics have a lot of overlap with the rating systems.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. And that's a good segue to, if you had a crystal ball, what's around the corner? Sustainability, green buildings, healthy buildings. What do you think we should be reading up on?
So definitely wellness is going to become more popular and all that. I don't know that the certification systems are going to take off, but the topics are Class A office space continues to mean something different. And you can just tell by, the furniture that's in offices now, or the amenities that are provided. Like as people become aware of the benefit to occupants, increased ventilation and increased thermal control, and some of that is going to become the norm. So, wellness is going to continue to grow in popularity, I think. The research out of Harvard School of Public Health and others is great. The cognitive function studies that have come out. Recently, I think their most recent one a few weeks ago now, something about how students in dorms with air conditioning perform better on tests than have better cognitive function than students without air conditioning during and after a heat wave. Well, those types of results, I said in a whole bunch of projects with schools, universities, talking about whether or not we should add air conditioning to their spaces. Now there's data evidence that shows that if they don't add air conditioning, the students will perform more poorly, less well, which I think intuitively we always knew, but becomes harder and harder to ignore those things. Though it's still a question of cost, and it's a really valid question. So those are going to become more and more popular. I do hope that more people are going to focus on facilities and adequately staffing the existing buildings. Facility managers, the bulk of them are older. It's an industry where there's going to be a lot of people retiring and not enough people coming in. And at the same time, buildings are getting more sophisticated and we're building more. So we need more facility managers. So I think that's going to start to get more and more attention. It has gradually, but it's going to continue to be the case. And then I hope that some of these more aspirational, the Living Building Challenge, the net zero energy, the passive house, I think we're going to see more of those as people demonstrate that they're possible.
No, I second all that. It just makes sense that ROI on wellness real estate's got to mean a little more to each and every stakeholder, but it's there, it's coming at us fast. And you're right.
Go ahead. Especially right now, well, we happen to be in a really strong economy. So companies need to do whatever they can to attract and retain top talent. If it were a bad economy, that'll go away quickly. But right now, all of our clients, everybody is trying to do whatever they can to attract talent.
You nailed it. It's a very competitive market out there right now. And I'm in not just a green building, but I'm in a healthy building. And here's what that means for you. It just makes sense. That's the edge. That's the advantage today. Nathan, good stuff. Good chat here. A couple more questions. I'm just curious, this is a tough one, but what's your specialty? What's your gift? What do you think you're best at?
I've always heard that phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. And a lot of times in sustainability, I'll hear people talk about that because you want to be cross-discipline. And to a large part, that's always been my philosophy as well. But I think that I'm able to get into the details of a lot of different specialties pretty quickly, and more so than most. So when I see a process, I want to become an expert on the process, the integrated design process, the commissioning, the life cycle costing, whatever those processes are. But I really try to understand each of the specialties, and to the point where I was working on a green master plan a while ago, and the architect asked if I would take over as the electrical engineer. And I've had other projects where the mechanical engineer wasn't comfortable energy modeling, so I just did the energy model. And I'm somebody with a marine biology background. I didn't go to any design schools. I'm not an engineer of any sort, but I really enjoy understanding what the various specialties are doing. And not that I want to do their jobs, but I want to understand well enough that I can really intervene. And my old boss, Leith Sharp, would talk a lot about organizational change and improving systems. And her point was that you first have to understand the system before you can change it. And I think the way that I define understanding the system is understanding it with a high level of detail.
Yeah, I like that answer. I get it. Busy guy, not just on the normal day-to-day side, but you're really investing in the master's and undergrad programs at those great universities. So what are your best practices? What routines, rituals, what helps you stay on point?
Yeah, well, so I've always tried to be committed to professional development. For when I had staff, it was a big part of my annual budget was to make sure that all the staff that we had organizational goals and personal professional goals that align and that they got their training. But I've always done that for myself as well. And not just the things that interest me, but the things that I think will make me a better, sustainability professional, manager, et cetera. So I always try to split my time 50% between technical trainings and learnings and 50% more managerial and, what I find less interesting, but I know are at least as important. So yeah, professional development is a ritual, if you will, a commitment. This evening I have a Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commission webinar that I'm taking because I've joined my town's conservation committee and I want to learn more about the Wetlands Act. So that'll be later today. But then also I really try to push myself to talk at conferences, to teach, to always write case studies. That's one of the things that Harvard's Green Building Standards I got implemented was every project has to have a case study afterwards. And I've always tried to write something up in every one of the projects that I work on, including Rwanda and including now at Shawmut. making myself organize my thoughts. It really helps me to understand the topic better and to be able to obviously share it with others, so that the knowledge management piece, both for myself and then to be able to share with others and hopefully encourage continuous improvement. So yeah, I like telling my story on projects, on successful and unsuccessful attempts. And I try to force myself to do that after every project, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's good stuff. I'm a fan of a bucket list. Are there one or two things you could share? Maybe some adventures, some travel, maybe even still something business-wise, but what's on the bucket list?
So when I was in the Peace Corps, I want to say 1999, 98, something like that, I wrote up a bucket list. And at one point there were 60 some items on there. And I know my mom said it's still at her house, so I keep meaning to look at it. So I have a long-standing bucket list that I've kind of forgotten about. But a lot of those things I know I have done, like drink rum in Cuba, or there were a lot of family-focused things that now that I've recently had 2 daughters, I'm hoping to do, like host a Thanksgiving at my house. So yeah, I have a lot of very specific travel here, do this, and then family-focused things. But I own some property in North Carolina, in Durham, and it's just an empty lot on the Eno River, just next to the Eno River State Park. And I would really like to do a net zero energy, super green building where I was pretty involved in the design and then the construction of it. So that's my retirement / bucket list goal, is to design, with the help of architects and engineers and stuff, but
Heck yeah.
be very instrumental in that design and eventual construction.
Congrats on the daughters. And I've got 3 young boys myself. And hey, maybe go ahead and build out that net zero home, rent it out on Airbnb. And then one day when you're ready to head down there, it's already paid for itself.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking something like that. Yep.
Thanks for sharing, man. That's so cool. Books. I don't know if you listen like Audible or you like a good hard copy, but I always like to ask my podcast guests, what are 1 or 2 books you might recommend?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't read books that often anymore. When I do, it's almost always work related. The newer version of Well or whatever is coming out, the newest study from that Harvard group on cognitive function. But I listen a lot in the car, so I don't use Audible. I use whatever the app is that allows me to access Audible books from my library.
Yeah.
So whatever is coming off the waiting list. I'm on Bob Woodward's Fear right now. I just did David Sedaris's Calypso. The books are pretty random. And I did read one recently, listen to one recently, a John Grisham book, and I don't even remember the title, but it was nothing special, but it talked about the coal industry in Virginia. And, just a reminder of how horrible mountaintop removal and some of the tactics that coal companies have used. And, it seems prescient right now as there's talk of, we need more coal or whatever. Yeah. And I listen to a lot of podcasts as well, but I listen to all my audiobooks and all my podcasts at least 1.5 speed, if not double speed. So I just to try to get more in on my drive down to Connecticut. So I listen to books fast and in the car.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. My Audible, I do at least 1.5 speed podcasts. Obviously, I'm grateful you're on this podcast. Are there, 1 or 2 podcasts you could give a shout out that you enjoy? I'm not sure if you're like me, but I actually subscribe to a lot, but just depending on how I'm feeling or where I'm at, I might catch up on some because, podcasts, you can consume it. It's as we want it content, but are there 1 or 2 you'd recommend?
Yeah, I really like a lot of the technical, less political, more detailed, the weeds for politics. So I like the weeds. I like the political gab fest a lot, sometimes a cultural gab fest. 99% Invisible, though, is one that I think is a great, a weekly podcast that's more design focused. I encourage everybody to do that one. And it's not, you can always go back and listen to old episodes for that one. And then I do like Malcolm Gladwell's Revisionist History. So whenever he comes out with a new season of that, I'll start listening to the most recent one.
Very cool. No, he's a big hit. Well, let's wrap it up here. I always like to ask, because there's some listening that are just now jumping into a green building career. Others maybe been in it a while and need that spark. But, any words of encouragement or any advice you wish you'd had a little earlier in your green building journey?
I think, I have a sort of an atypical background, and I've jumped around a lot in what I've studied, what I've done. So I just would advocate that that's okay. You can work your way into, if green buildings is something that interests you, and people used to ask me this a lot when I was working at Harvard, but now that still when I teach, students will reach out and ask, say that they're interested in getting involved. It doesn't really matter where you came from. I think there's a way to get in, but you kind of have to think through where you can contribute. Sustainability now is, there's enough professionals that you need to also have something else. So, get involved through construction or through civil engineering or, whatever through healthcare, if that's the part, but there is I think a way for anybody to get involved if they want, regardless of their background. You don't need to be an architect or an engineer to get started. And then just also, lots of people probably say this, but sustainability makes business sense. The occupant wellness side, the saving the planet side, at the building level, and obviously at the more macro level as well. And this is always the way that I try to approach when I always think that I'm talking to a client, and let's talk about the realistic, costs and benefits, talk about sustainability that way. I'm altruistic. I still care about people and the environment and that, but it's rarely part of how I present my arguments. And I think you're going to be more successful and you'll have more receptive audiences if you talk a lot more about the business implications and the return on investments and the life cycle costs and those things. So usually we're looking for money when we're trying to advocate for something around sustainability. So I usually try to focus on how that money might see a return.
Yeah. Wow. Wonderful advice. You're right. You got to focus on the business case. The net result is it's better for the environment, but focus on the business case to sell those projects and those upgrades and those retrofits that you need to be out there doing. So, Nathan, you really are a jack of all trades here in this green building movement. Love your work on the facility side, and just want to say thanks. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Charlie. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to listening to more of your podcasts as you release them.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode, and you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast, tell your colleagues, and if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.